Poor diets is one of the greatest killers across the whole world, and that's quite a new phenomenon. We are now surrounded by highly available, affordable and accessible food that is unhealthy. It's full of fat, salt, sugar, and it's highly processed. The effects are even more keenly felt for those on poor incomes. Those in more deprived areas are more than twice as likely to be living with health effects such as obesity than those in affluent areas in the UK.
We used to speak about junk food in policy, but now a more common term is that of ultra-processed foods. You might have also heard high in fat, sugar and salt products or sugar-sweetened beverages. And each of these categorisations or definitions can be quite complex and difficult to really understand what we mean. But what is common across each of these categorisations is an industry that produces, sells and markets products that are detrimental to our health.
We know that marketing of food and the pricing of food drives the consumption of unhealthy foodstuffs. Cheaper foods are quite often the high fat, sugar and salt options. So, whereas the food industry would dispute it, the evidence is fairly clear that the marketing and pricing of unhealthy foods drives consumption, it drives unhealthy choices, it makes them more available and it makes them cheaper.
It's completely unfair at the moment. The way you live determines what you're likely to eat. There's lots of advertising in areas in lower incomes, and there's lots more takeaways on unhealthy high streets.
People are living through a really difficult time at the moment, particularly in the cost of living crisis, and an area that people will have really felt that is in the cost of the food that they bring into their home, particularly when those products that are more affordable in supermarkets are often those that are considered unhealthy, so high in fat, sugar or salt, for example.
Like other industries, the food industry tends to exploit crises. In the case of the food industry, that can, for example, take the form of donations to charities and other types of what's called corporate social responsibility activities. While these are very visible, the food industry itself will still be pushing in the background unhealthy food options.
So shifting our focus to regulating the food industry would really entail taking a much more holistic approach to trying to regulate our food environment. So that might look like policies that make healthy foods cheaper and more affordable than unhealthy foods for people to buy. That might also be looking at addressing the advertising that people are exposed to. So for example, what children are exposed to online through social media advertising. They're often quite bombarded by the amount of food advertising we see there.
A really interesting example of how pricing has been used is on the soft drinks industry levy. So they targeted the manufacturers, so they had to pay a certain amount of tax for the amount of sugar in their drinks. If they reduced the amount of sugar, they paid less tax. So what we've seen is that drinks have been reformulated to have less sugar. People are still consuming and enjoying their drinks, and the money that's been raised from it has been reinvested back into children's health. In food policy, we have so much to learn from the comprehensive approach on tobacco. We know that real change didn't really happen until government started focusing on the industry and rather than on the individual. And we need that to happen on food policy, and we need it to happen now.